classic Nintendo. They always do the most unexpected stuff. I mean, was anybody seriously expecting Virtual Boy to show up here? I will say, though, it is kind of funny looking at the reactions of people, and despite the fact that you clearly see the iconic silhouette of the Virtual Boy, people are just staring at it in, like, confusion, like they have no idea what they're looking at, until they turn on the lights and show, like, the actual full thing. But it's like, did you seriously, like, not understand what was happening when you saw that? You're just like, what could this possibly be? No, I just thought that was kind of funny. But, now here's what I think. I think it's cool. I think Virtual Boy is awesome. Okay, well, maybe not, like, the actual, like, console itself, but I mean, like, the fact that they're adding it to Switch Online is awesome, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I do like the Virtual Boy. I have one. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's neat. It's pretty fun. I wish there was more games for it. Like, I have a few of them. I got like V Tetris, Panic Bomber, Mario's Tennis. I did sell some of them to my friend because they were incomplete and I want to get some complete in-box games. But yeah, I do like the console. I wish there was more games for it. Obviously, like, could you imagine if there was like a Metroid game? That would have been awesome. But yeah, no, I think they're pretty cool. And I think what they're doing here is actually pretty interesting. So first of all, I'll say I was not expecting them to actually have a recreation of the Virtual Boy console itself. That's amazing, right? Like, they've done controllers for the other systems, like, that makes sense. But the console itself, I mean, if they wanted to have 3D, that kind of makes sense, right? But having it in this manner is really cool, right? Now, granted, I would have liked them to have a controller as well, because it's just the console itself, and not the controller. So, I mean, I would have liked to have a controller as an option, just like the other ones, but if they had to choose between having the console or the controller, I'm glad they went with the console. But not having 2 D-pads is going to kind of suck when playing this thing. That's all I'm saying. Another interesting thing is the fact that it's required. Like, I understand that the games are in 3D, right? And here's what I think about that. So, the Virtual Boy was always intended to be played only in 3D, right? It's not like the 3DS where you can turn off the 3D. Like, that was never an option on the Virtual Boy. And some games kind of need the Virtual Boy. Like, if you've played Wario Land on an emulator, you understand that, especially in, like, some of the later stages, the backgrounds get pretty crazy. So, if you're not playing in 3D, it's kind of hard to see what's actually going on the screen in a lot of games, especially in Red Alarm. Red Alarm specifically is one where you basically need the 3D in order to play it. I think that's a cool game. It's like an on-rails, it's basically like a Star Fox game. My only complaint is, obviously, it'd be nice if there was textures instead of just wireframes. But overall, it's pretty good, and obviously the render distance is tiny, but other than that, it's a pretty fun game. And I think a lot of virtual games are actually pretty good. I think this is going to be pretty cool. Again, the problem, though, is like the price of the thing. It's $100. Now, I personally, as soon as I saw it, my thought was, this thing's going to be $200 fucking dollars. So it being only $100 was a pleasant surprise. I was expecting to have to pay way more. But $100, I think, is reasonable for what you're getting here. It's also interesting because in order to even play this, you need obviously a Switch or Switch 2. 2, you need Nintendo Switch Online. And not just Nintendo Switch Online, you need Nintendo Switch Online plus the expansion pack. And you need to get one of these headsets. Now, you can either get the Virtual Boy main thing for $100, which is what I'm going to do, or there's like a cardboard version for $25 because they know, okay, if it's required, we have to have a cheaper option, right? We can't just charge $100, right? Not to mention, this, I mean, based on what the cardboard thing looks like, and just the fact of how VR would even work on this console in the first place, I would imagine you can probably use Labo VR. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to use Labo VR, at least for the Switch 1 version. So that's probably an option, not to mention there's plenty of cheap third-party ones you can buy for way less than what Nintendo's charging. So I don't think it's that big of a deal because, realistically speaking, anyone who wants to play Virtual Boy games is probably willing to shell out a little bit more, especially considering that you have to pay for the expansion pass anyway, so you're probably pretty dedicated. Another thing, though, is I've seen some people complain that because it's required to use these accessories because it needs to be played in 3D, it's too expensive or it's too inaccessible. But the thing is because the Virtual Boy requires 3D to play in the first place, and these games basically need it to work properly or to be able to be played in the way they were intended, it's sort of anti-art, in my opinion, to play the games in 2D, and anti-art to really complain that you have to play them in 3D, because that's the way they were intended to be played. Like I said, it's not like the 3DS where you can just turn that option off, right? The Virtual Boy requires 3D. It's like playing a VR game without VR. Like, that's not kind of defeats the whole purpose of the system. Also, another thing that's sort of like misconception is when they showed the games on screen, they said these 14 games are planned to be released over time. That's not all the games. Like, I know, like, I've seen a lot of reactions where people are looking at it and they're like, that's all the games. And a lot of people seem to think that that's all the games. That's literally not all the games. There's 22 Virtual Boy games officially released. Now, granted, there was 14 released in North America, but as you can see from the image, it includes some Japanese games, and in total, like I said, there was a few Japanese exclusives and a few American exclusives, some of which aren't here. Like Waterworld is a game that's not on here. There's Space Squash, I don't think that's on there. SD Gundam Dimension War is not on there. Panic Bomber is strangely not on there, which is odd to me because that's a Bomberman game which is owned by Konami, and Konami has other games on the service, so I don't see why it would be a problem. Now, granted, it just said these ones are planned, so it's possible the plans change and they can add those games later, which I think is very possible, if not probable. But the really strange omission here is Nestor's Funky Bowling. Now, Virtual Bowling is included, but that's a separate game, because there was 2 bowling games on Virtual Boy, surprisingly. One of them was Japanese exclusive, which is what we're getting. We're getting Virtual Bowling. But the American exclusive was Nestor's Funky Bowling. That game, while pretty basic, is a first-party Nintendo game. So I don't see why that one's not here. I've heard some people say it's because the artist that created Nestor in Nintendo Power had to sign off on it or something, and they couldn't get him. I don't know if that's true, and I don't really see why that would be an issue, considering Nintendo owns this. Like, I'm pretty sure Nintendo owns the character Nestor and the game. So I don't really see why that wouldn't be included. I just think that's kind of weird. But other than that, like I said, the only other complaint I have is the controller, the lack thereof. A lot of people seem to be confused why they're doing Virtual Boy, and they said, oh, it's so unexpected, and I was being sarcastic, of course, at the beginning of the video when I said this was unexpected. This is totally expected. I think Nintendo, this was inevitable, as I said in the thumbnail. This was always going to happen. I think Nintendo's goal, eventually, is to have their entire back catalog available on their platform. That's what I think their goal is, right? And the reason they hadn't done it before is because that ecosystem had been replaced before they could get far enough to be able to implement Virtual Boy. The closest we got to having like a complete back catalog was with Wii U and 3DS. And granted, not everything was available on one system because it was two systems. So on Wii U, you had Wii games available, some of them, as well as N64, NES, Super NES, Game Boy Advance, and DS games. On 3DS, you had Game Boy and Game Boy Color, as well as they also had like SNES and stuff on there. So the only thing they were missing from that was GameCube and Virtual Boy, if I'm correct. There was like N64 DD stuff, and of course they didn't have every game, but for the most part, they had most stuff covered. Right, at that, up to that point. But then the Switch came along and replaced that ecosystem. Now, the thing is with the Switch 2, it uses the same ecosystem as the Switch 1. It has the same account, has the same eShop, and the Switch was Nintendo's longest generation. So they've already got NES, SNES, N64 covered, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance is already covered. They even added Genesis games to the service, and they just added GameCube as well. So the next easiest thing to do would have been Virtual Boy. Now, granted, I wasn't totally expecting them to, do it in 3D, like in the way, and recreate the system and everything, but I was expecting Virtual Boy to show up here at some point. And I do think eventually we're going to get like N64 DD games. Those might just be added to N64 Online and not be like a separate app, but I do think eventually, I think DS is coming. They might have like a second screen add-on. I think eventually we'll get 3DS, Wii games, and I do think eventually, maybe not on Switch 2, maybe on Switch 3, I do think they're going to re-release the gamepad and put Wii U games on there. And it's going to have everything available on one system. I think that's ultimately Nintendo's goal here. Like I said, we've seen this strategy before. Now, 3DS would have been a perfect opportunity, in my opinion, to release Virtual Boy games because those were 3D. But again, it might have been an issue of they wanted to make it so that the 3D is required. It's also possible they just didn't get to that point before it was replaced. But either way, that's why I think Nintendo requires the Virtual Boy stuff, and why I think it's showing up here in the first place. Like, this was going to happen, no matter what. I'm honestly just surprised that they haven't raised the price of the service. Now, I think that is coming. I think we are getting a price increase. It's probably just going to increase $10. I'm honestly surprised they didn't just create, like, GameCube and Switch 2 editions as a separate tier, and then maybe add Virtual Boy on to that. But yeah, that's why I think Virtual Boy was always gonna happen. It was just always in the cards. I mean, this was inevitable. Like I said, the only thing I'm surprised about is I didn't have like all the first-party games available, but of course that might happen later. Anyway, that's basically all I have to say. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys think about Virtual Boy, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.